Well, welcome once again to Bible Talk with Bruce and Becky. We have had a longer delay than usual between episodes, partly because of the holiday. I hope you and your family had a great Thanksgiving. We were delayed with our flight from Chicago back home. No, wait, we didn't go anywhere. Just see if Becky's paying attention.
What?
We're talking about the holiday and being delayed in our flight, but we didn't have a flight.
No, we didn't. Maybe you did. I wasn't there.
Seriously, folks, it's good to be with you once again this Sunday after Thanksgiving. We're going to begin today in Mark chapter 5. We're in the midst of a series of miracles that Mark has recorded. Before that, in chapter 4, he had some examples of parables that Jesus used in his teaching. Now, through chapter 5, he will present a series of miracles answering the question that the disciples raised at the end of chapter 4. Jesus had just calmed a storm on the sea. It scared the disciples quite a bit, even though they were seasoned fishermen. And so they asked in Mark 4, verse 41, it says, they were filled with great fear and said to one another, who then is this, that even the wind and the sea obey him? That's the question that Mark wants to help us answer all the way through this gospel. Who then is this man Jesus? He has power over even nature and its strongest forces. Well, beginning chapter 5, we'll see that Jesus has power over other things as well. Becky, will you please read chapter 5, the first 13 verses?
They went across the lake to the region of the Gerasenes. When Jesus got out of the boat, a man with an impure spirit came from the tombs to meet him. This man lived in the tombs, and no one could bind him any more, not even with a chain, for he had often been chained hand and foot, but he tore the chains apart and broke the irons on his feet. No one was strong enough to subdue him. Night and day among the tombs and in the hills he would cry out and cut himself with stones. When he saw Jesus from a distance, he ran and fell on his knees in front of him. He shouted at the top of his voice, "What do you want with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? In God's name, don't torture me." For Jesus had said to him, "Come out of this man, you impure spirit." Then Jesus asked him, "What is your name?" "My name is Legion," he replied, "for we are many." And he begged Jesus again and again not to send them out of the area. A large herd of pigs was feeding on the nearby hillside. The demons begged Jesus, "Send us among the pigs. Allow us to go into them." He gave them permission, and the impure spirits came out and went into the pigs. The herd, about 2,000 in number, rushed down the steep bank into the lake and were drowned.
Quite a remarkable incident involving a man who was demonized. It says that he has an unclean spirit, but we learn in the story that he has many spirits possessing him. They give him superhuman power. They have knowledge that's not available to everybody. They know that Jesus is Son of the Most High God, and they use that name hoping to gain power over him. It was widely believed in the ancient world that you could get power over a demon by pronouncing its name, and vice versa. They say that their name is Legion, which comes from a Latin word for a unit in the Roman army. The number of soldiers in a legion would vary from time to time, but several thousand. In this case, we might guess there were 2,000 spirits in the man because they entered into a herd of 2,000 pigs to destroying the pig and the livelihood of whoever owned them. But the gospel writers don't seem concerned about the loss of the pigs, mainly because they were from Jewish background. We know they are now on the other side of the lake in Gentile territory. No Jewish farmer or herdsman would be raising pigs, an unclean animal, perhaps fitting for the unclean spirits to go into them. But Jesus now had demonstrated power over a storm and power over the demonic world. I'll read the rest of this incident beginning in verse 14, unless you have something to add or ask, Becky.
Well, it puzzles me that the demons request to stay in the area.
It puzzles everybody because
Okay.
we don't have a whole lot of knowledge about that. They do want to stay in the area and they seem to want to have some kind of body to inhabit, even if it's the body of a pig. But we don't know a whole lot about demonology, except superstitions that people have had. But we can't learn that knowledge from this passage. Good issue that you raised, and my answer is I don't know. Verse 14, the herdsman fled and told it in the city and in the surrounding country. And people came to see what it was that had happened. And they came to Jesus and saw the demon-possessed man, the one who had had the legion, sitting there, clothed and in his right mind. And they were afraid. And those who had seen it described to them what had happened to the demon-possessed man and to the pigs. And they began to beg Jesus to depart from their region. As he was getting into the boat, the man who had been possessed with demons begged him that he might be with him. And he did not permit him, but said to him, go home to your friends and tell them how much the Lord has done for you and how he has had mercy on you. And he went away and began to proclaim in the Decapolis how much Jesus had done for him, and everyone marveled. People naturally curious about this unusual circumstance, but instead of rejoicing that the man who had been out of his mind because of the demon possession could not be bound even with chains, is now at peace and back in his right mind. We might expect people to rejoice over that, but instead it terrified them because they had no idea what kind of power could do this. Even though the demons want to remain in the area, they asked Jesus to leave. They'd rather have a demon-possessed area than to have the Son of God there, although they don't fully realize who he is. Well, Jesus goes away after the man who'd been possessed wants to stay with him. But Jesus feels like the man can do more good by going home and telling in that area what Jesus has done for him, thus becoming, I guess we could say, the first evangelist to the Gentiles. The area is called the Decapolis. What would that mean in Greek, Becky? You're a noted.
10 cities.
10 towns or 10 cities. Hey, you real smart.
Like Indianapolis.
Yes, Decapolis, 10 towns. All of them Gentile for the most part. And so he starts telling about Jesus, kind of planting some seeds for later follow-up by other evangelists. Although Jesus himself does not proclaim the gospel in Gentile territory. Okay, we can move on unless you have something else to add or bring up another good question.
Oh, probably several that don't have answers, but we may go on.
You want to go on? That's probably easier than me saying, don't know. Well, we have two miracles that occur almost concurrently in the rest of this chapter.
Say that again.
That. I don't want to say occur concurrently again. I get my tongue tangled up. Well, Becky, please read in chapter 5, verse 21 through 34.
When Jesus had again crossed over by boat to the other side of the lake, a large crowd gathered around him while he was by the lake. Then one of the synagogue leaders named Jairus,
I would say Jairus, but Jairus is okay.
came, and when he saw Jesus, he fell at his feet. He pleaded earnestly with him, "My little daughter is dying. Please come and put your hands on her so that she will be healed and live." So Jesus went with him. A large crowd followed and pressed around him. And a woman was there who had been subject to bleeding for 12 years. She had suffered a great deal under the care of many doctors and had spent all she had. Yet instead of getting better, she got worse. When she heard about Jesus, she came up behind him in the crowd and touched his cloak, because she thought, "If I just touch his clothes, I will be healed." Immediately, her bleeding stopped, and she felt in her body that she was freed from her suffering. At once, Jesus realized that power had gone out of him. He turned around in the crowd and asked, "Who touched my clothes?" "You see the people crowding against you," his disciples answered, "and yet you ask, 'Who touched me?'" But Jesus kept looking around to see who had done it. Then the woman, knowing what had happened to her, came and fell at his feet, and trembling with fear, told him the whole truth. He said to her, "Daughter, your faith has healed you. Go in peace and be freed from your suffering."
A remarkable story. And once again, Mark uses one of his favorite literary techniques, the so-called sandwiching of two stories together. The story here begins with the synagogue ruler asking Jesus to come heal his daughter. And before Jesus can get there to do the healing, a woman from the crowd touches him. She had suffered from some kind of hemorrhaging for 12 years. And she has enough faith to believe that all she needs to do is touch Jesus and she can be healed, or touch his garment even. We can guess why the woman was reluctant to present herself before Jesus and tell him what the problem was. Why would that be, Becky?
Well, she would be considered unclean.
Yes, her bleeding would make her unclean, which means that she should stay away from people in general, from crowds at least.
And just the fact that she's a female would make it kind of strange for her to go touch some man.
Yes, it would. Are you suggesting that Jesus lived in a patriarchal society?
And
Say
howdy.
yes. Big time. As most of the ancient world was, they considered male rights and privileges to be greater than female. But Jesus doesn't seem to share that belief. It's remarkable that Jesus knows that someone has touched his garments and he felt power go out from him. We can't readily identify with that knowledge, but he wants the woman to come forward so that people will know that she's been healed and that she's no longer unclean. Okay, anything else about this remarkable incident before we move on?
Your faith has made you whole. Just still more questions than answers in my mind. Her nobody had told anybody that touching the garment would heal her. So this was something in her own mind.
Well, it showed Jesus recognizes that she has faith. That it's not an automatic thing to just touch his garments, as the disciples say, as usual, trying to straighten Jesus out. Lots of people are pressing against you in this crowd. How can you say, who touched my garment? Well, only one of them touched him deliberately with faith to be healed, and she is healed because of her faith, verse 34.
It makes me wonder if some people whose superstitions are extra biblical concerning healing, if God can recognize their faith regardless of its errors.
I wonder too. So whoever sees him first can raise that question.
Because there are plenty of superstitions out there about healing.
Yes, there are.
Going to Lourdes or praying to a saint or whatever.
Or a shaman, a medicine man. But how many of those really result in healing is debatable. If you'll remind me between now and our next episode, I'll recommend a book that answers some of those questions, but I'm not going to track it down now. Well, we've been in suspense while this woman got healed as to what exactly has happened at Jairus' house, the synagogue ruler, and his little girl while this has been going on. So beginning in verse 35, I'll read to the end of the chapter where our questions will be answered somewhat. While Jesus was still speaking, there came from the ruler's house one who said, "Your daughter is dead. Why trouble the teacher any further?" Well, their faith is not strong enough to believe that Jesus can take care of this problem, even though the daughter has died. Mine probably would have been more like theirs. But overhearing what they said, Jesus said to the ruler of the synagogue, "Do not fear, only believe." That's been the title of many a sermon, and it's a good lesson to learn. Faith can drive out or overcome fear. I'm sure the synagogue ruler was feeling many emotions, among them fear that it's too late for Jesus to do anything. But Jesus tried to stir up his faith. And he allowed no one to follow him except Peter and James and John, the brother of James. They came to the house of the synagogue ruler, and Jesus saw a commotion, people weeping and wailing loudly. And when he had entered, he said to them, "Why are you making a commotion and weeping? The child is not dead, but sleeping." And they scornfully laughed at him. A big commotion going on. The synagogue ruler would be wealthy enough to hire professional mourners. That's not a custom we're familiar with, but it was quite a custom among Jews at that period. If you could afford it, you not only had your family mourning, but you would hire professionals who knew the best lamentation songs and how to weep and tear their clothing properly and maybe cry crocodile tears. Can you imagine what a profession that would be, being a professional?
During the time of Dickens, that was still, they were still hiring people to walk in the cortege behind mourners, the family.
What, Dickens?
Yes.
Yes, Dickens is one of our favorite authors. Well, let's conclude this story. Jesus causes them to mock him by saying she's only asleep. Doesn't mean she hadn't really died, but as far as what's going to happen next, she's really just like one asleep. She's going to wake back up. But these mourners who've seen many a dead person think they know better. Jesus put them all outside and took the child's father and mother and those who were with him and went in where the child was. Taking her by the hand, he said to her, Talitha Kumi, which means, little girl, I say to you, get up. And immediately the girl got up and began walking. Mark tells us she was about 12 years old. They were immediately overcome with amazement. And he strictly charged them that no one should know this and told them to give her something to eat. Well, everybody, I'm sure, including his disciples, think that the girl is dead and she's not coming back. But Jesus goes in with the parents and with 3 disciples who were with him. Who were those?
It had to be John and Mark and
Mark is the writer, but he's not a disciple at this point, is he?
oh,
Peter, James, and John, the 3 who were with him at other remarkable incidents like his transfiguration.
okay.
Remember those?
I knew John.
Well, his brother James and Peter.
Okay.
Peter, of course, being the first pope, would need to be there.
How?
Y'all know I'm joking, although he is claimed as the first pope. There's no evidence that the early church thought of him in that way, although he has an important place among the disciples. The girl's 12 years old. I think Mark puts that in to show us a parallel between this 12-year-old girl and the woman who was just healed of a 12-year disease. It's just, is it a coincidence? Who knows? But there's a connection here in the text. And Jesus speaks to her in a language we don't speak now when he says Talitha Kumi. What language was that?
Aramaic.
Hey, good girl. Aramaic.
Are we still in a patriarchal society because you're patronizing me?
I'm good at patronizing. Learned over many years. I didn't mean to patronize, although it could be taken that way. I am impressed with your knowledge.
Thank you.
I wasn't really patronizing. Intentionally. Yes, Aramaic, a dialect similar to Hebrew, but Hebrew was no longer spoken commonly at the time of Jesus, having been replaced by Aramaic among the Jews and Greek among the Roman Empire in general. Well, Jesus told them strictly, don't tell anybody about this. How long do you think that lasted?
Uh-huh.
Probably until they got out of the room. How could you not tell anybody that your daughter had died and been raised? And some people had already, the mourners who had already been there knew that she was dead. But Jesus is trying to prevent the wrong kind of faith. People who are coming only to see what they can get from Jesus, healing or perhaps power and recognition like the disciples were seeking. But Mark wants us to have the right answer to his question, who then is this? That even the wind and the sea, the demonic world, incurable disease, all of them are as nothing compared to his power and authority. Well, we know the answer. He's told us at the beginning of his gospel that this is the gospel of the coming of the Son of God. But the people in the stories that, as they're being told, are still struggling with that question. Well, Mark wants us all to know the correct answer by the time we get to the end of his gospel. Well, I believe our time is about up. Next time, I hope Becky will remind me between now and then the book I'm going to recommend about miracles. And we'll resume at chapter 6 next time, hoping that there will not be a long delay between the 2 chapters. And so we'll just say, God bless you and don't send money.